Who are your favorite wrestlers growing up? Who made you become a wrestling fan? Are you still a fan of that person to this day? Do you still go back and watch their matches? Do you regret some of those decisions? Let's talk about that today on The Wrestling Mat. I am Matt Camp. Welcome in, and thank you for being with us here at thewrestlingmatshow.com. For some bonus content, if you're a Matt member, you're getting this as soon as it comes out. You're getting it for the premiere. And maybe you're getting it after the fact. But what we're going to talk about today, I think, is something that resonates with everybody. What made you fall in love with the wonderful world of professional wrestling? Who made you fall in love? Was it a story? Was it gear? Was it a title? Was it an entrance? Was it music? How did you become a professional wrestling fan? That's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about my top 5 favorite wrestlers when I was growing up. And here, I'll give you some dates. And think about this, because I know I'm talking to people of all ages. I was born in 1985. My wrestling fandom started in 1990, 1991. So that's what I'm growing up with. And to me, growing up is through about high school, because you're going to get names probably from that 1990 through 1998 era. That's it to me. That's, 1998, 2000, up through there. You get into the high school years, I know some people fall off. But think about that. Leave it in the comments. Tell us as you watch this video. Who are your favorite professional wrestlers that you think about as a kid? How have they changed over the years? How do you look back on them now? You're not going to see Hulk Hogan on this list. You're not going to see Ultimate Warrior on this list. I don't think I was growing up during John Cena and Randy Orton years, so they're not going to appear for different reasons. I'm not mad about the 5 wrestlers that are still on my list. And I think some people will have those that, maybe as you get older, you look back and go, ooh, maybe not so a great guy. And like, maybe she wasn't so great. Maybe not a great person. I don't feel great about that, but I get it. You grew up a Hulkamaniac. You weren't fast forwarding to all of his trials and tribulations that would happen later on in his life. You weren't thinking about that when you were young. You could say the same thing about Ultimate Warrior, all the things that came out about him. And there's other names on here that are going to be discussed here today or brought up in conversation. I'm just talking about who made you love wrestling. Who made you want to keep watching wrestling? Who were you talking about when you were going to school? Did you see so-and-so do this? Oh my God, that was awesome. Who are those people to you? We discuss all of these types of things at the Wrestling Mat. It's weekdays. It's 1 p.m. Eastern. A lot of you know that already. Maybe you're a new member. Maybe you're seeing this at a different time. It's the most interactive pro wrestling show out there because we like to have conversations like this. Yes, we're talking about plenty of current wrestling. That's the crux of what we do at thewrestlingmatshow.com. But I love having the discussions of why people are fans, what still sticks with them, stories that stick with them. We break down wrestling from different angles on this show, and I like to look deeper. I always bring up the idea of it's the characters that connect with you. Maybe there's a match that you saw that blew you away, but it's because you became invested in the wrestlers you saw. That's the memory that sticks with you. And it's also sometimes, we'll probably do a future video on this, the 5 wrestlers you hated the most. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. To quote someone who's on my list, that's a good thing. I don't mean hate as in, that person's terrible. I mean hate as in love to hate. I mean, they were good heels. They made you like your good guys more, or whoever your wrestlers were. It made you like their opponents more. They're doing their job. That's for another video, for another time. But let's start. Now, I will say, once again, I was born in 85. You do the math. Think about what I grew up with, the years I grew up with, the end of the golden era, the end of Hulkamania, into the new generation, into the Attitude Era. I'm right there. I was lucky enough to get all that stuff. And I will say I never stopped watching. And I had friends that I would talk about wrestling with in middle school and high school, and that was it. And they discovered other things. They discovered relationships, love, They went to college and they studied and they learned things and they left wrestling behind them because they outgrew it. And I know that happens. And I know people have come back for various reasons. I know people come back because of that nostalgia factor. I know people that come back because, hey, I can watch Peacock or the WWE Network or YouTube and this old stuff, and then you see a recommended video, perhaps like this one. And it brings you back and you go, wait, that's going on now? Oh, I'm sure 2025 will bring wrestling fans back who are John Cena fans, who haven't been around to watch what's happened since then. I'm sure the boom of wrestling over the last year is bringing people back. And it's why we see biographies on A&E or documentaries on Peacock or wrestlers just popping back into pop culture. Because WWE and any smart wrestling company will try to make the most of everything that they own, current and the past. That's why Legends deals exist. That's why at SummerSlam we saw the Legends box with DDP and the Steiners and Kevin Nash and Miss Jackie and Sergeant Slaughter. There's something cool to that. It's why at WrestleMania season, whether it be at WWE's own sponsored events or WrestleCons that happen or any of the big WWE shows that bring other companies into town, that people are still signing to this very day, signing pictures, promoted with pictures that were taken 30, 40 years ago because people recognize them from those times, and that's what connect. You see wrestlers that are in their 60s and their 70s, and they're being advertised with a promo picture that was taken in 1991. And you know what? That's how a lot of people want to remember those people. Nostalgia is a very important part of wrestling. Nostalgia, when used correctly, is a great part of wrestling. It can connect generations. I always said wrestling is one of the few things where someone who is brand new to wrestling, let's just say as a wrestler, can end up on the same card as someone who's been at WrestleMania. Can wrestle on the same show. Tom Brady isn't playing football with Pop Warner kids on the same day. Patrick Mahomes isn't playing football with people who are just learning how to play football. But in wrestling, that can happen. You go to an indie show, you're going to see a legendary name. You're going to see a bunch of people you may not know. But you'll know those names down the road. I've been to those shows. It's a pretty cool thing. And hopefully, sometimes those legends that are on the shows are willing to talk, are willing to give advice. I've seen shows in front of gyms of 50, 60 people, and hey, Farouk's getting a hot dog outside. There's Ron Simmons getting a hot dog. No ketchup, damn. I witnessed that happen once on a show that my friend was wrestling on, who doesn't even wrestle anymore. Wrestling's cool in that way. Legends pop up on some of these shows with people who have barely started in the business. And I also think it's cool that maybe a young fan who has only seen Raw or SmackDown or Dynamite or whatever it may be goes to an indie show and has no idea who a legend might be seeing on the card. And Sergeant Slaughter doing a signing or trying to think who. Matt and Jeff Hardy at this point in time. You might not know them for certain runs. And Kevin Nash has talked about this so many times. I'm seeing 6-year-old kids at signings wearing NWO shirts. NWO is going to turn almost 30 years old soon. Those kids were negative 20-something. But why? Nostalgia also connects families who watch wrestling together. I love those stories. Well, my grandfather watched Bruno Sammartino, and now he watches Roman Reigns with me. My grandmother loved Dusty Rhodes growing up, and now I'm a Cody Rhodes fan. And a lot of that, you know what? A lot of that is part of character sometimes. Sometimes it can be too much. The story of Cody Rhodes winning the WWE Championship dates back to his dad and was correctly used in that way. that the Rhodes family can never bring home the top championship in the top company in professional wrestling. And using Dusty's name the way it was used, telling Cody's story, having Cody pose with the championship his father wasn't able to hold, or the various championships that his father did hold. They were both NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. They did similar things, but then Cody did what no one else in his family could do. He became WWE Champion, and they told that story through nostalgia. Then Now Forever is certainly a catchphrase. It's a nice corporate lingo. It's good PR. It's good marketing. It's also true. It's also business. WWE would love to have generations of fans. They would love to connect that. Yeah, you got to create new fans, but they would love to have families that pass that along. My first show was in February 1992. My dad took me to Madison Square Garden. I'd been watching wrestling for a couple years. It was a month after Ric Flair won the WWF Championship in the Royal Rumble. And I got to see on that day Undertaker and British Bulldog and Roddy Piper and Repo Man and Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan and Sid. I saw them all on the same show. My dad took me to that show. My dad wasn't a big wrestling fan. He liked the spectacle of it. He didn't care that I watched it. But he enhanced my fandom. My parents encouraged my fandom. They taught me about what I was watching. And of course, you hear people say, it's fake, it's made up. Okay, sure, whatever. I think I knew that from a young age. I think I was on the internet at 9, 10 years old on CompuServe. And yes, I'm dating myself. You can Google what CompuServe was or America Online. When there was no WWE.com, there was the WWF keyword that you would type in and bring you to the WWF AOL page. Go look for that. That exists. But I would find wrestling websites that would report the spoilers of shows. Here's the Heat spoilers. Here's the Raw spoilers, because what they used to do was they would go live on Monday, and the next day they would tape Raw for the following week. That used to be a thing. I might be blowing some people's minds right now. That's how Raw, for a time, was presented. That is why Eric Bischoff would feed lines to Tony Schiavone or say them himself about the results of the show. And he would do it in code. Oh, the big man beat Kid. Whatever. He would use the names of guys, whatever they were in WCW. He would read that off because he had them, because those websites existed. And yeah, I know about Bill Apter and Dave Meltzer and Wade Keller and all that. But then more and more sites came out, and people were calling in the results or sending in via email the early here's what happened on Sunday Night Heat tonight that they taped before Raw. Here's the Raw tapings. Here's this. Now, forget it. Every piece of results gets out as soon as it happens live. House show results get reported. Extensive match stuff. But now it's as easy as having this. It's why the famous curtain call at Madison Square Garden with Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon and Triple H and Kevin Nash. I know I'm mixing up names there. Somebody shot that on like a camcorder, like a big ass camera. They brought in, like, now that could happen at any show and no one would care. It would be normal. There would be a curtain call moment wouldn't happen anymore. But it does give me that feeling of nostalgia. It does make me want for a time that is not so 24/7, where you had to look forward to Raw or weekend wrestling. It wasn't so quickly at your fingertips. And that's why ratings are different now. There were less channels back then. I sound ancient even saying this stuff, but there were less channels back then. There was less programming. We're always on Monday. See you in a week. Sure, there's some weekend shows, but then they didn't become as important. Oh, you wanted to see Stone Cold or Brett? Okay, cool. Here you go. And I'll see you in a week. SmackDown didn't show up till 2000. So let's get into my top 5 favorite wrestlers of my childhood without further ado. This is coming in at number 5, the only name on the list that I enjoyed for being a heel. Everybody else on here, young Matt Camp, starting to speak in the third person. Sorry, I always have to do that when I think of Dwayne. And then I realized I shouldn't become a fan of these guys because they're terrible people, but I didn't find that out till 30 years down the road. Anyway, I just can't help myself. Everybody else on this list is a babyface, or I like them because they were baby faces. Not this guy. Number 5 in the list, and I don't have representations for everybody, but I have representation for a lot of them. This is the representation of Mr. Perfect. With that right there. Number 5 on my list, Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig. Probably because I was a sports fan. I distinctly remember the vignettes. Wade Boggs throwing the football to himself. The 40-foot putt. Felton Spencer. There you go. There's a name. Former Minnesota Timberwolf playing basketball with him. Everybody going, perfect. I thought how he walked to the ring was cool. I thought his singlet was cool. I thought when he, with the gum, and if I was a real pro, I would have had gum there and smacked it across my room here. But I didn't do that because I'm not Mr. Perfect. There was something cool about Mr. Perfect. He did the neck snap. I don't know how many times I had to try to recreate him doing the flip over the head, neck snap, whiplash. It didn't do anything. That was cool. There's a great example. That I was hooked by a cool move. The perfect plex nobody kicked out of. You want to have something that's burned into my brain growing up? You didn't kick out of the perfect plex. If he hooked it in, good night. And that's burned into my head by commentary. By Gorilla, by Bobby, by Vince, Jesse the Body, I'm sure, Lord Alfred Hayes, Mean Gene. It was a unique move that nobody else did. I didn't know what a fisherman's buster was or fisherman's soup. I didn't know that. I knew what a perfect plex was, though. And when somebody kicked out of it, holy hell, was that a big deal? It didn't happen. The bright colors, the hair, the confidence. Little me liked that. Even if I loved, the people he went up against. Brett comes to mind. SummerSlam 91. Perfect's back. And I didn't know this. I was 6. Perfect's back is wrecked. He had the coach with him. Not quite Bobby Heenan. Had the coach with him. But his singlet's ripped. Like that to like you might hear that and go, what do you mean his singlet's ripped? Who cares? Mr. Perfect was perfect. His singlet wouldn't be ripped. People weren't kicking out of the perfect plex. He was Mr. Perfect. Sure, he cheated to win and was always arrogant about stuff, but he backed it up. That was him. That was attractive to me as a fan. He was cool. So Mr. Perfect is the only heel on this list. He comes in at number 5. Number 4. Went back and forth in this one. Right there. And this is, I guess, technically WrestleMania 8 gear based on what's on here. They got me as going back to Mr. Perfect with Brett's singles run. I like the Hart Foundation. I like the matches against the Nasty Boys. I like the matches against Demolition. I like the pink and black, the sunglasses. The sunglasses were always over. Brett as a singles, though. The hair, the pink and black, the moves. I think Brett would be over in any era. His jacket was cool. The tassels were cool. The black and white boots. A good guy wearing pink, not for heat, because that's what his colors were. An ultimate babyface, wanted to do it for the fans, had the fan support. I remember Lonesome Dove. I remember when he took time off to go shoot that show. Mini series, whatever. Go look that up. Go look up Bret Hart, Lonesome Dove. Pause this. Go check it out on another device, whatever. Open up another tab. Bret acted as a, God, he did a couple other things. I feel like he was a genie in something. I think Aldis did that too. But Bret did some acting stuff. Bret having Salt and Pepper dance on him at WrestleMania. But I remember Bret as the IC champ, of course. I remember Bret and Perfect. I remember Bret and Piper at WrestleMania 8. I remember being excited that Bret was getting he was getting Yoko. I remember all that stuff. But I fondly remember hearing months after Wembley Stadium with Bret and Bulldog. And I didn't watch that show live. I don't know when the hell I watched that show. That might have been a Monday SummerSlam. That actually used to exist. But a couple months after that, whether it was Lord Alfred or Mean Gene or Sean Mooney, I don't remember. I can go look this up. But finding out that in a town I never heard of in Canada, Bret Hart beat Ric Flair for the WWF Championship. Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing at the time for a 7-year-old me. What? Where? And they taped it for Coliseum home video. But Bret won the title. Kind of out of nowhere. It took, and it's, you could watch it now. It exists now. But like that was our guy. For a lot of kids, like that was Bret was that commercial. Bret, and he turns around like that was our guy, and he beat Ric Flair. And all I knew of Ric Flair growing up was he was the guy with the blurred title. I didn't learn WCW stuff until 94, 95. And then 96, I famously have told the story that my aunt, who would tape WWF pay-per-views for me because she had one of those black boxes. Go look that up. Go look up cable black box. Different world back then. She would tape the WWF pay-per-views for me. She taped Bash of the Beach 96 for me by mistake. And that is how I got into WCW. Yes, I got into WCW by mistake. And the first full show I watched was the debut of the NWO. But I didn't know about the NWA. I didn't know about WCW. I knew Ric Flair was the champion of some other place as a 6, 7-year-old. There was this blurred title, which was like, what does that mean? He's the real world's champion. But then he won the Rumble. Then he was the champion. And he lost it to Savage. He won it back. He lost it to Bret. Then he was gone. Ric Flair does not have a long first run in WWF at all. But Bret, he was the guy they went with. And I was a Bret fan. And I watched him have a really annoying feud with Jerry the King Lawler about feet and dentists. and Hakushi and Doink and all that stuff. But I was still with Brett the whole way. We'll get to the other part of that in a little bit. Because you don't always have to make a choice. That's a hint. Number 3, though. And I went back and forth. I could have put Brett in 3. I put DDP in 3. DDP was the first WCW wrestler that caught my eye when I started watching. And it's the Diamond Cutter. It's 100% this. Don't sue me, please. And the Diamond Cutter. And the way they would call the Diamond Cutter. And I will tell you another big reason why I liked it. ASMR. You want ASMR from wrestling fans? WCW rings. For whatever reason, the mic job, how they were built, they were a little smaller than WWF rings. Because they were. Whatever it was, the sound is better. It is the all-time best sound in wrestling, is a WCW ring. Go listen. There's some kind of compilation out there of either diamond cutters or jackhammers. And listen to the sound. Boom, boom. Just, it felt like you were hitting something that hurt. And it just had a sound. Every impact mattered more. And those diamond cutters. And DDP could hit them intentionally at a different positions. Whereas Randy, RKO out of nowhere, we don't know that. DDP would set it up differently. He would grab you for it, bring you in. He would flip you out of a power bomb. And that was a thing. He was trying to innovate in that way. That got over with me. I don't ever think I thought the NWO. I don't think I was one of the people like the NWO is cool. I was intrigued because that's Diesel and that's Razor Ramon. And now that's their names. They're with Hogan. Hogan's a bad guy. But I don't think, I didn't get a black and white shirt. I never did. Down the road, I did. I got one for free. When the company I was working for had them. But I got a red and black shirt. I was a Wolfpack guy. But I don't think I ever liked the NWO. I was happy when Lex Luger beat Hogan. I think it's one of the best moments in wrestling history when he beats him on Nitro. Ringing the bell. And he loses 6 days later, whatever it was, a week and a half later. No doubt about that. But I like DDP. I like the Diamond Cutter. I liked his promos. I like that he challenged the NWO. I like that he never joined the NWO in any iteration. He has talked about how they missed the boat on a People's Champ matchup. True or not, I don't know. My guess is if they had done that match in 1998, yes, DDP was that hot. By the invasion and all that stuff, no. He had been through Millionaires Club, New Blood, and a Triad, and babyface turn, heel turn, the Insiders, all that. It wasn't the same. I'm talking about white, hot, babyface, all the way DDP. Hey, man, there's a reason he got those celebrity matches. There's a reason for that. He was that over. You could definitely make the argument that DDP should have beat Goldberg at Halloween Havoc. He gave Goldberg his best match. DDP getting over because of Randy Savage. And Randy, I'm going to take the Diamond Cutter tonight. DDP tells that story. DDP dressed as La Parka. Unmasking. All great shit. Has been copied so many times since then. Both in good and bad ways. A move got over with me. And a guy who felt like an underdog. Who I think had his... As I remember this, and I know it's not the truth, I felt like DDP had his ribs taped for about 3 years. That he wore the black tights, the purple tights, or he wore the jeans for a while. It always felt like DDP, that was part of it. You tape up his ribs. Bob Orton had the cast. DDP had taped up ribs. That's how I remember DDP. It's weird to see him wrestle without them. The taped up ribs. So DDP's on the list. Back to number 2. And there's different eras here. There was a time that my number 2 wrestler was absolutely my favorite wrestler in wrestling. And not to say that he's not, but I bought everything that he did. I'm not saying I bought merch. I'm saying I bought his character. I took the journey. Number 2, and what a representation of him, Shawn Michaels. My sister is about 6.5 years younger than me. Doesn't watch the product like she did growing up, but watched it when I watched it, and she liked Shawn. And I vividly remember being in my parents' room, watching TV, watching Raw. I think I had it taped. I want to say that I watched it with her after. And God, she was, let's see, this is 97. So she would have been like 6 years old. I would have been like 12, 13 years old, whatever it was. And we watched and got sad, and I think cried, when Shawn Michaels lost his smile. Good God, that sounds ridiculous now when you know all the stories behind it and everything. But little kids watching our favorite wrestler be sad, can't be champion anymore, giving the title to the commentator, that was a bummer. We were Shawn fans. I always liked watching Shawn. I liked him on the Rockers. He was one of those guys that captured me with his matches. His gear was cool, the hearts, the mirrors. You know, Shawn was one of those guys who I think connected with a lot of people because of his full-on presentation, and obviously one of the greatest in-ring workers of all time. But I think one of the best stories told in the company is Shawn from Rumble 95 to Mania 96, Mania 12. Winning in 95 from 1, being the heel, having to fight his former best friend, losing, turning babyface soon after. The Syracuse stuff, he's out of the way. What happened to him? Coming back to fight Owen, to fight Jeff Jarrett, having great matches, great feuds, to get back to the Rumble in 96, to eliminate Diesel with the super kick, to win the Royal Rumble, to move on, to get the boyhood dream, Jose Lothario, the training montages of Brett and Shawn getting ready for a 60-minute Iron Man match, unheard of. Unfortunately, overrated and kind of boring. But I was hanging in with it. I look back now, and you got to think about that. That's why I said top 5 wrestlers growing up. That list probably looks different. You probably look back on people differently. I like my list. I know I liked Ultimate Warrior for a time growing up. I would never put him on a list now for a lot of reasons. But for Shawn, I was in on everything. I was hanging on every bit of WrestleMania 12 in the Iron Man match. And the sharpshooter at the end that he hangs on to and then comes back, and I was like, he's got to win now. Super kick. And he wins. And he bows down at the title. And here we go. That boyhood dream felt like my boyhood dream. That's how I look at that. And, I think I appreciated the Mind Games match with Mankind way later in life. I thought the table spot was crazy, but I was like, there's all these guys that ran in, because there was a bunch, Vader and Taker and all that stuff that was going on. Gold Dust, whatever. And I remember when Shawn came back in 2002, so I would have been 17 years old. I remember when he was gone, I was bummed. But when he came back and he had that match with Triple H, And they had a hell of a match. And he won, but then he got crushed after. And I was like, he's back. He had the weird haircut, but he was back. And then we got a whole second run of Sean in a lot of different ways. He was one of those people that when I worked at WWE, when I finally got to interview him, and I got to do it a couple, like, I remember the first time, and I knew I was able to write questions and do things, I was very much of like, okay, I get to ask Shawn Michaels about all the stuff I watched growing up. I get to bring up 1 foot, 1 foot, one, on the same episode with Kofi Kingston sitting next to me, we're talking to Shawn Michaels about the Royal Rumble. Those are moments that I will look back on no matter what happened with me there. I got to talk to Shawn Michaels about the 1995 Royal Rumble with a guy who was synonymous with the Royal Rumble sitting next to me, also asking as a fan. That's a cool moment. Shawn talking about that, and, he says, man, Kofi had to keep coming up with those spots year after year. But Shawn having that 1 foot spot where it looked like he was out of the Rumble and nailed it perfectly, and they get the camera shot, and he comes back over and he knocks Bulldog off the top rope. It's like, wait, no, he didn't. No, he got eliminated. No, he didn't. 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot. And he came back over, and he skinned the cat, and he created his own Rumble spot. I got to talk to Shawn a few times. He once talked about Seinfeld. He's like, oh, this feels like, Independent George. And I was like, are we making Seinfeld references with Shawn fucking Michaels here? When I went down to NXT and I sat next to him when he was running NXT, on a show we had Braun Breaker on and Mandy Rose on, right in the middle of 2.0. And I sat next to Shawn Michaels. I had Shawn Michaels in my ear doing commentary for Level Up. Getting to walk past, the gorilla position in NXT and saying, hey, thanks, Shawn. Hey, good job today, kid. And yeah, Shawn's had his mess ups and all that stuff like that. But that's the kind of stuff. It's not about being starstruck, and I certainly had a respect for him, and I wasn't like fanboying externally, but internally, I took those moments in. The guy I watched growing up was making Seinfeld jokes to me. I'm talking to him about the biggest moment of his career. Hell, he's on the headsets when I'm calling a show. Those are pretty cool moments. And I remember telling my sister about that. And I'm like, I'm sitting next to Shawn Michaels. And I knew that was a cool thing to share with her. And I hope other people have had those opportunities. That's come up a lot. Take the picture. Wrestlers saying to other wrestlers, take the picture. Get that, get that image. Punk posts that stuff a lot. It's cool to have those. Whether you're sharing it with the public or not, I have stuff on here that people will never see. But I'm happy I got the moments. Which brings me to number one. And this is not a controversial choice. But I'll pull something off of here that has nothing to do with why I like him. Because it's sitting here. Stunning Steve Austin. But when I liked him, why he's my number one favorite wrestler, he's Stone Cold Steve Austin. You're probably like, cool, man. Number one, what a reveal. Yes, but I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to make a list for the sake of clicks. He is the person that I watched every week when wrestling was at its height at the time that everybody was watching, that we would come into homeroom and talk about when we were 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, 15 years old. Because he doesn't have a lengthy run. That's the thing. Far different. Far different. You think about how things really got heated up in 96. 2001 is the second Rock match. 2002 is the Scott Hall match. 2003 is the third Rock match. See ya. It's not that long. He wins the title in 98. In 2003, he's done. Not out of the main event. He's done. Yeah, Sheriff Austin, all that stuff. He's done. It's over. But man, That was I remember being in middle school, being in high school, and that's what we would talk about. Stone Cold, Vince. I can't tell you the amount of times that I tried to stunner a friend or they tried to hit me with the stunner. Like, that was just, don't try this at home, kids. But you did that. The stunner, I got an argument with my fiance the other day. She's like, what do you think's the best wrestling move of all time? She's like, the stunner. She's like, what a terrible answer. How boring that is. I was like, get at it. You don't understand the impact that move had on everybody. I'm sure, and I know kids got suspended in school because they were trying to hit the stunner, not to hurt their friend, but because it was the cool thing to do, because we saw it on Monday nights, because when he did it, the place went nuts. And JR would go nuts on commentary, and Shane would sell it big, or The Rock would flip over on his head 9 times, or whatever. Vince would take a good one half the time. He did everybody with them. He would, those times we would come out and wreck matches. He stuns Jeff Jarrett and does the strut. Stunning D'Lo on the car, the stuff with the Nation. Stone Cold coming out in a Jeep to fight the Nation. Getting thrown over into the Detroit River. Throwing the Rock's IC title into Detroit River. Zamboni. You know all this stuff. But my goodness, back then, it wasn't about wrestling matches. It was about Austin getting on the mic and drinking beer and yelling stuff and having the crowd right here the whole time. 316 shirt, rattlesnake. He looked cool. He'd say the words you weren't supposed to say. He gave the finger. And he was the only one giving the finger. Not like now where it's in like half the pictures you see. I remember going to a house show and he tagged with Terry Funk and Cactus Jack. And it was packed. Probably Continental Airlines Arena, Izod Center, Brendan Byrne Arena, whatever you want to think about. Where they ran 1 million shows. They don't run there anymore. Now it's like a TV storage facility. But I remember going to a house show. And I brought like a sign to the house show because like Owen Hart was in the Nation. And my sister, when I was a couple years older since we last talked about the story, he was being called the Nugget. And she's like, if you're not down with the Nugget, suck it. And that's what I wrote on my sign, as in suck it. We thought that was hilarious. And that's our humor. That's my Camp family humor. But I remember Austin, the main event with those guys. I should look this up. And I didn't know any better. I mean, I knew I wasn't at a Raw, but the crowd, this is what he was doing. He was the guy. He's the champ. And everybody got that experience. I've talked about that recently on an episode of the Wrestling Mat where it's not about the match. It's not about being on a show that's on Raw or SmackDown. It's people want to get the experience. To say they had the experience. John Cena wrestling dark matches years ago wasn't about him being on Raw or SmackDown. It wasn't about fans not getting him on Raw or SmackDown. They got him that night. He was advertised. He showed up after the show was over. The TV show was over, but that live crowd still got John Cena. That's why Raw people come over and work SmackDown dark matches and vice versa. Cody did that a bunch. Roman did that. You work the show you're not on because it adds some value to the ticket. You get the experience. Stone Cold would give you the experience. I think he also was having the time of his life on top. But you got the experience if you went to a show, no matter when it was or where it was. And if it was on Raw or SmackDown, didn't matter. The old Bruce, Hogan must pose, Austin must hit stunners and drink beers. Which is, I never wanted to drink beer because of that. I mean, I then ended up drinking some beers. But way after the fact. I wasn't like, well, he's doing it. I want to. No, I think I did it with sodas and stuff like that. I think my family was smart enough to only play to that. But I think about like those memories of Austin and appearing on shows and, TV Guide with Austin on it. And he would make appearances on talk shows. He was on Regis, and Regis had the Philbin 316 shirt, stuff like that, or whatever the hell it said. And then it's cool to go back and go, oh man, he was stunning Steve Austin. He was in the Hollywood Blondes. He wrestled in Japan? I recently talked about the time I met Steve and how cool it was to see him at WrestleMania and to be backstage and watch him be so locked in the shirt, in the jorts. The guy was my favorite wrestler of all time. He was on the bump one time, and I forgot what the reason was, some kind of anniversary. And we got to talk to him about his entire career. And I asked him about the match I think is the most important match in wrestling history because of what became of it. Bret Austin, WrestleMania 13, submission match. And I called it an Iron Man match. And I was mortified. Mortified. I said, "Whoa," and he went to correct me. I meant, sorry, Steve. Sorry, Steve. Yes, the submission match. All right. And, he was great. And he had said on the show, like, I watch the bump all the time. You guys really do your homework. Like, you get that from Steve Austin. And we got talked about his whole career. And I remember the one thing that really stood out to me and allowed me to ask someone else about this, him and Savio Vega. Having the Caribbean strap match, at Beware a Dog, and the lights go out, and they got to do it again. Talking to him about that, and then talking how much he gave credit to Savio Vega for getting him to where he needed to be. That was coming out of Ringmaster, and DiBiase was going to be done, and okay, now we're going to go into Steve Austin. And God, he loved working with Savio. And I got to talk to Savio a couple times about that, and how much he loves Steve. And that's not something you probably think about with Austin. You think about Rock, and you think about Triple H, and Kurt Angle, and Brett, and Owen, and Taker. But there is a connection between those two guys that still exists. And that's what Steve is. Steve, there's probably stuff that I love or you might love of Austin's that he doesn't love for some reason. He's told the story about WrestleMania 15. He's about to beat The Rock for the championship. He's head somewhere else. He's going through a divorce. He forgets his vest at home. 15 is a good match. It's not a great match. 14, he's not a fan of that match. Shawn was taped together. His back was a mess. He knows they had more. He didn't like that. And you can look. He doesn't love that Tyson fast counted. Because he does. Doesn't really take away from the moment, but it's interesting to hear someone like that who's been to the top, what they like about their career and what means a little bit more. Him and Savio meant a little bit more, and it's cool to go back and look at that and go, oh, this is important to him. And for a guy who's that good, when Austin used to do his podcast before Broken Skull, he did one where he watched back him and Rock at 17, which is considered, one of the heights of wrestling. And he basically does behind-the-scenes commentary of the whole thing. And it is so interesting about looking for cameras, and we got him here and slow down. I mean, that guy, I think if you catch him, and I don't think many wrestling fans will get this opportunity, and Steve's a homebody and wants to stay in his home state and all that stuff. But to hear him break down the nuts and bolts and why they did something is so interesting. And I know that somebody put the commentary that he did on his podcast to the match. I think you can go find it on the internet. I don't know where it is, but I know it's out there because I've watched it before. Whether you're a student of the game or friend or you like Steve or a fan of Steve or that match, it doesn't hurt the match. It won't change your perception of the match. It's pretty cool to get inside his mind and about why that's a guy who's a student of the game, who studied everybody, who can still talk about wrestling in that way. We don't hear from him much anymore, but you want to talk about someone who was in tune with everything. Austin. And That's why he connected with me for various reasons. And he connects with me in different reasons now. So there you go. That's my top 5 wrestlers growing up. You might have come from a different era, older or younger. Who are your top 5 favorite wrestlers growing up? How has that list changed? Let us know in the comments. Hit us up on social media, WrestlingMatt23. Twitter, Instagram, me at the Matt Camp. We're doing more bonus content. Whether you're watching this as a Matt member, which you could be at the WrestlingMattShow.com, or check it out below. You could join there. You're catching it, when it was released down the road, perhaps. We like having these discussions here. I hope they make you think. I hope they make you enjoy what you used to enjoy and think about that differently. And I hope the comment section below is filled right now with people's top 5 favorite wrestlers growing up and the memories they have. Certainly share those, because I'm sure I'll go back and look at this and maybe pull some of those comments out to talk about it at a later time. But make sure, if you're not a member already, and you very well likely might be, you become a member at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. You're a subscriber, you're sharing, you're telling people what you like about the most interactive pro wrestling show out there. And I'll have plenty more to come, because you know what happens. I'll be back to talk about wrestling even more right here on the Wrestling Mat.